Welcome back to the Wealth Witches podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Magnuson. Today we have Dr. Darla Bishop, who I am so excited to have on the podcast. We're going to be chatting about 5 ways to not be in the 41% of couples who divorce because of financial disagreements. And if any of you are longtime listeners, you know that is near and dear to my heart. And I think is really important for all of you that are listening today. So a little bit about Dr. Darla Bishop. Dr. Darla Bishop, affectionately known as the Finansis, is the founder of Finansis LLC, a boutique consulting firm based in Lansing, Michigan, and the author of How to Afford Everything. Her practical advice has empowered countless people to take charge of their financial well-being, granting them the freedom to live life on their own terms. Dr. Darla, welcome. I'm so excited to have you today.
Oh, you don't know. I'm excited for a magical time together.
Fancy. Yeah, no, I'm so here for it. You and I were chatting before all of this, but I was married and divorced really early, and finances absolutely played a really big role in that, amongst many other things. So this is such an intriguing topic for me. I know when we were like chatting about it, it just really struck a chord. So I would love to hear a little bit about like your background and how you got into doing what you're doing now. I mean, I know we got the short and dirty of it in the bio, but how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, so I am originally from Detroit and had all types of weird, bad, traumatic, depending on what part of the story we're telling, things happened to me as part of my upbringing. And when I was away at college, I saw that some of the other students just had a completely different lifestyle, relationship with money, way of being. And I was like, well, I'm here with them. And I had to overcome a whole lot of stuff to get here to be with them. And so I'm probably a little bit smarter than them in some ways. And so all I got to do is figure out the money part and I'll be fine. And so I started reading books and then telling my friends and my siblings and my coworkers like how they could be better at money so we could go do fun things together. And also they wouldn't get as mad at me when I said, hey, it's not in my plan this week. Can't do that this month. They knew I was working a plan, right? And over the years, just kept giving people mostly solicited money advice and had this book inside of me and finally said, you know what, I'm going to write it. Because every time I'd read a new book or a new blog or find a new influencer, I'd be like, I could have wrote a book. I could have wrote that. And so my husband kind of said, you know, you've been saying that for a while. You finally finished school because I was in school for a very long time. Why don't you figure out what it would take to do that? And so I did.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, I feel the mostly solicited advice. It can be tough sometimes. And you spend your life talking about it, or like you're really invested and hyper focused. And oh, wait, but eat. Waiting for the invitation is definitely something that I've struggled with some of my friends. But now it feels really comfortable to be able to chat about, and everyone just knows. So I get asked a lot more, but it's also just a topic of conversation that comes up when friends are here, which is nice,
It is
right? You get
nice.
to have that and not it doesn't feel taboo, and people can bring up things that I know, at least in our case, like I have friends that are like, hey, I don't even have a Roth IRA set up. What should I be doing? Or when I come visit you, can you help me get this going? And I'm like,
Hmm.
yes. Yeah, like I would love to. It's very much the rising tide lifts all boats kind of a thing. I don't
That's
want to be
right.
here like feeling comfortable and have my friends just, you want to go do fun things with them and engage them in the journey.
That's right. And I'm actually a little bit selfish in that there was a situation where my husband's in the military and we had moved and we were in the process of buying a house. And out of anger, I had paid something off because I was like, I can't believe I'm still paying this bill. So I think I like paid it off and emptied one of my savings accounts by accident. And I called a friend and was like, hey, could I borrow in this very specific dollar amount? And she was like, sure. Do you need it in a check? You want me to like, how do you want me to send it to you? And I didn't realize until 2 days later that she never asked me what I needed the money for. She was just like, how do I get it to you? And I was like, damn, I've got some good friends. And so when I finally got around to say, hey, I noticed you never actually asked me what you needed for, she said it was a very specific amount and you told me when you were going to get it back to me. So I wasn't worried about you needing it for a specific purpose or that it would come back to me. So I just figured we'd work on the logistics of getting it to you.
That's
Thank you.
amazing.
But I want friends like that who I can call. I think it was like it was $5,000 and some very specific dollar amount.
Right.
And she had no problem sending it to me. No
Right. Which is
problem. I
not
was
an
like,
insignificant amount of money
that is
for
a
the
lot of
vast majority of
money.
people. Yeah.
Right. Even if I was just holding it for 30 days, that's a lot of money to be like, sure, I'll write you a check. And I want all my friends to be able to be like, sure, I'll write you a check. It was an amazing experience. That was like, yes, I want everybody to be able to like, can I hold some money and be like, yes, here's a check.
Amazing. I love that. That's such a great story. And especially I don't care what it's for. Like you had a plan. It was very clear to me that you had a plan, you needed this. Yeah, it's not just, oh, hey, can you float me XYZ and no, we'll figure it out. No, like we will figure it out later. I know you need this for a purpose. Ugh, I love that. I love that so much. I'm here for the conversations around finances with our friends, with especially as women, to be having these conversations because it's been seen, I think, as taboo or so many women don't get involved in that. Excuse me? How many women have been running the household finances for how many years or being responsible for it, but then not being allowed or being seen as being able to be earners? I've been the primary earner in my household for 15 years now, dramatically so. I work with tons of women that are the primary earners in their family. And even if they're not, they're big contributors. So being able to have that conversation, which is part of the reason I think it lays like dovetails so nicely today with the topic that we're chatting about, is finances and relationships and marriages are complex. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, how to end up not being a part of that statistic.
Yeah. So upwards of 41% of people divorce in their stated primary reason. There's usually a list, but that top reason is around financial disagreements. And this makes sense if you think about it, just like past that first statistic, that we are all raised by different people. Even sometimes your siblings, even though they have the same parents, end up different, right? And so you've met this person as an adult. They already have some habits, some behaviors, some beliefs that are formed. And if you've recently watched Inside Out, beliefs are formed as early as 11 and can be pretty tight even from that age. And so you're meeting them as a young adult, maybe even a not so young adult, and now have to figure out how to live together. And so one of the pieces that I think communication always gets a bad rap because they're like, well, you probably just didn't communicate. Well, communication is both art and science. And when it comes to money, depending on those beliefs, those values, those habits, those behaviors, depending on how compatible you are when it comes to money, one person might be like, yes, let's talk about money all the time. I love talking about money. I love us having a plan. I love us writing things down and looking at the bank accounts and being a team. And the other person, no, we don't talk about that. We do it, we make sure it works, and we move on. And so you have to figure out, where is the bridge and what are the settings, the actual physical environments that allow for those conversations to happen, so that when they are a little uncomfortable at first, because the first few times you do it, it's not going to be great. But then the more practice you have at talking about money and having that conversation and asking questions and answering that questions and getting that back and forth, it really does make a difference. And so communication is part of it, but how and where that communication happens absolutely matters. So one of the techniques I usually recommend to people who are having a hard time is something I learned in a psychology class about parents who need to get to talk to their teenagers, right? Like, actually, the car can be a fantastic place for these conversations because you're intimate, right? You're physically close together. You are in a closed off space, so it's okay to have a private or sensitive conversation. Because you're in the car, you're physically close, but you're not looking at one another. And so you can take that moment to take a deep breath, to calm yourself down, look out the window and say, I cannot believe he just said that, if that's what you need to do, right? And also have that intimate moment without that kind of conflict of being face to face. And so if money is a hard thing for you all to talk about, figure out what the best place to have it, and then start having conversations only in that best place, whether that's on a dinner date, on a long car ride, when the kids are away, if you already have children and you're in the middle of doing something. But figure out the time and the place, because that could be one small change that's really easy to make, that makes the conversation just go smoother because you're in the right setting.
Absolutely. I love having conversations in the car, whether it's finance related or not, because it takes away that element of confrontation. I feel like, even though we're together by ourselves most of the time, the second that you're face to face, it can feel a little more aggressive at times.
Yeah, that's right. And especially if there's sensitivity, right? Because if you're coming in each with your own set of behaviors and habits and beliefs around money, because this beliefs part is really hard to get to, because we don't always know that our parents give us these gifts of how to think about money, of how to talk about money, about how to use money until we sit down and really think about it, which is rare, right? Most of the time, we're just living our lives. We're doing the best we can. We're learning a little bit. We're doing the things that hopefully bring us joy, some of the things that we just know we have to do. But unless you've actually sat down and said, every time this comes up, I think this about money. And where does that come from? Unless you've actually done that work, and most of us haven't, you might not know that you're carrying around a belief from your mom or from your dad that really made sense for their situation, right? But doesn't make sense for where you are. And so you might have to say, thank you, belief, but you no longer serve me. Have a nice life somewhere else.
I have a
Goodbye.
really interesting real world example of that my husband and I had to work through. Again, on the surface, our backgrounds are very similar. Our families are relatively similar, income class, similar work history, very differing money beliefs. And I have been self-employed the majority of my adult life. And my husband worked, in my opinion, a job without a lot of advancement potential. It was safe, it was medium paying, and it was comfortable. And I had job hopped corporate wise and also had my business that I'd been running because to me, you can be let go from a job at any point in time, right? So having my business, the chance of all of your income vanishing from your business overnight seemed much more like something I could control, right? The likelihood of that. I was playing the statistics. And we finally got into a heated conversation about it one time because I was just nagging on him. You should leave your job. You should leave your job. You should leave your job. What are you doing? And he, on the flip side, felt like what I was doing was unstable because it's self-employment. And he actually said, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but he said about 10 years ago, I don't think that you're going to be able to support us or that this is going to work. And I got my little Taurus Scorpio, stubbornness. And I was like, woohoo, you just told me I can't do it. Watch me, which, yeah, can be good. It can be a little toxic at times. But I realized, like, through my own, self improvement journey, he watched his dad work jobs that were much more stable over the years. And his dad's one foray into self employment never succeeded. And so there was that story there. I watched my dad work as an electrician and have very unstable, lucrative, but unstable job histories. And my parents had a business for a while that was successful until they closed up shop and did that. And so it was just interesting to me the differences from such a seemingly similar background. And so for us to finally reconcile that we had, like, we were coming at it from two similar but very different spots. And that's where so much of our conflict was.
That's right. And the tough part about it is it didn't come up until there was a big conflict. And so it's, whoa, we're in the middle of a fight, but that was really important information we just uncovered. How do we take advantage of the information while we're still both like real heated? Because you just told me my business is going to fail and I want to use some choice words that I probably shouldn't use with the person who I've declared recently that is like the person I love most other than myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that happens. And I think too, the other thing that I want to encourage anyone in any type of relationship, whether it's a relationship with your parents, your siblings, a significant other, a spouse, is all this shit is made up. All of it. If you go to another country, if you go to another county, if you go to another town, the way that people do things to make their lives work is always going to be a little bit different because it's all made up.
Mm-hmm.
It's all this shit is made up. And so if you and the person you're in a relationship can figure out what works for you, the people in the relationship, awesome. And what everybody else has to say doesn't really matter because they're not in the relationship. But that takes a lot. That takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of stick to itness because the people around you will ask questions and share opinions and share advice. And usually, thankfully, from a place of love, but you still got to hold strong and say, well, thank you so much for that. And then ignore it. Because if it's working in your relationship and both people in the relationship, or, all three people, whatever you got going on, the economy's tough. I have considered polyamory. All right. So if the people in the relationship are safe and feel like you're moving in the same direction, that's what matters.
Exactly.
But it takes both individuals to be strong in that individually and together to move forward in that way.
I think that can be tough, especially when you have a parent or a trusted close person to you that's not nefariously, like chatting in your ear. But I mean, I think I've even talked about this on here. We generally sleep in separate bedrooms now because we both sleep better. That was like exploded. My parents thought that we were headed for divorce, which like also not the worst thing in the world. At the end of the day, if I'm not scared of it, right? Like I am here, I am in it, but I'm not in it if it's no longer healthy. But that it just felt like such a weird, oh my God, why aren't you sleeping in the same room? Well, because he likes to watch South Park all night and have white noise in the background. I like to have a completely blacked out, quiet room with brown noise playing and with a weighted blanket on. I am zen. Those are not compatible. Same thing with money, right?
Right.
He's not working outside of the household. He's very much a homemaker now, which is very much a traditional swap of the roles that you see. And it's been interesting to live in a much more conservative area now than we did originally. And some of the pushback or the assumptions or the beliefs that others put on you, they all assume that he like retired from tech and he's fronting our lifestyle. I'm like, and he's great about, yeah, no, my wife owns a company. This is what we're doing. But does it matter at the end of the day? Those are their assumptions. If
Right.
what we're doing is good for us and we love it and we make tweaks as we need it, fuck cares.
Right. As humans, we are meant to be in community. And because of the way that our societies have changed and shifted and evolved and mixed, we are all having to chart our own path in so many ways that isn't the same that maybe 2,000 years ago when folks were in the same tribe with really being all related to one another, having the same geographical issues, the same food demands, right? These are not things they had to work out. Whereas like we now are all mixed up and have all these different histories and we're coming together. And so we have to really create our own thing. And that takes work and it takes, again, a lot of courage and a lot of thank you for sharing your opinion that does not matter to me without alienating the people in your community, because we need to be in community, right?
Right.
That's how we survive. That's how we thrive. And so, yeah,
Right.
sure.
Especially, yeah, assuming that it comes from a place of caring. Thank you. I'm going to do what works for us. Appreciate it. Know that you love me, but what works for you may not be what works for us.
Yeah. But then there's also that dynamic of, well, how do I maintain a positive relationship with that person, as well as in my household, as well as on this side, right? So it's a lot of juggling. And one of the things that can also help with that, and this is, I think if we're counting, this would be number 3, is setting common goals, right? Because working together towards anything, it gives you really good practice at that communication. It gives, especially once you have some wins, maybe when you have setbacks, being able to talk through that and to see how the other person kind of reacts and to give them the space and to let them give you the space and the grace as things work and as things don't are really helpful, especially if you can do it with small things early in your relationship. Like having some common goal is really amazing. And especially if they're little, something as we want to save up for this type of wedding, if you're at that stage in your relationship, we want to save up for this type of vacation. I'd really like to do this thing for my parents. I'd really like to do this thing for my siblings. How do we make that work? And creating some common goals to work towards is awesome, especially when it's like low risk, when it's something happy, because if you can get that practice in when something big and crazy and possibly bad happens, because you've had all that practice with the little things, the negotiation of how to figure this out, how to get out of this issue is easier because you've had all this practice. That muscle is warmed up.
I love that. I absolutely love looking at it as like a muscle that you've trained, you've warmed up, you've like, why not do it with something that's fun when you can of your choosing instead of waiting to have to figure it out when something potentially negative, catastrophic, etc. Medical bills, or, there's so many things that pop up. A parent that needs elder care, like your own disability, chronic illness. There are so many things that life can throw at you that require very good communication, but also like collaborating. And I love being able to collaborate on shared goals, whether they're less savory or exciting, but it's because we've been practicing for years now.
That's right. And so the more you do it, the easier it gets. Like I used to work in sexual education. And so I remember you could always tell the kids who had parents who talked to them about sex all the time versus the kids who had parents who were like, no, we don't talk about that in this house. Because just the level of comfort, what things they shared, what things they were happy to answer versus shy about. And it's just because those kids with the parents who talked about sex all the time with them, whether they loved it or hated it, they just had a lot more vocabulary and a lot more practice. And so
Absolutely.
same thing with your money. Just talk about it all the time. Even if it's uncomfortable, because soon enough you'll be like, whoa, we were just talking about money and I didn't even realize. Because everything you do, for better or worse in this society, has a time consequence as well as a money consequence. And usually that also means an energy consequence, right? Like, how much energy do I need to expend to get past this or through this or to the other side? And so if you can think about things in that way and be like, if we make this decision, what's the money consequence going to be? And how do we work through that? What's the time consequence going to be? And how do we work through that? Will it affect our energy individually or even together? And that's a kind of a simple framework to start the conversation if you're not sure where or how to start.
I love that. That's a really great way to frame it, because I think for so long the energy aspect of that was left out of the discussions that we were having in our household. The time and the money are very obvious, but for us it would come down to, if we were prioritizing a goal or changing work hours or changing how we divvied things up, that might mean that one or more of us had taken on additional work, which might mean that things at home need to be shuffled or help need to be brought in, or what's that trade-off there, and are we willing to make it? And I think that until it maybe ended up in a not so healthy explosion or breakdown of, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this, and being able to figure out, like, oh, one of us has taken on more than the other, maybe it's time to shuffle.
That's right. And I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier in this conversation, but I remember when we first got engaged, we had decided to move in together because I had made it really clear that I was fine with going to the courthouse because I didn't want to go into debt for a wedding. And my husband has a large family. He said, I cannot do that. My parents will disown me. But on the other side of that, they will probably help us if we are organized about it. I was like, oh, organized? That's my middle name. No
I got
problem.
this. Yeah.
Do they want the spreadsheet or they just want to know what we want help with? But shortly after he moved in, I realized we were fighting over stupid stuff like dishes in the sink, because I realized that while he wasn't a messy person or a dirty person, he also did not care what the condition of the house was. He just didn't care. And so he could walk past something. I'd be like, you didn't see that? He's like, yeah, but like, I figured you would take care of it later, or it was there for a reason, or, like, I don't know, like whatever. And on one hand, that was super helpful because if I had a crazy week or day or month, there was no pressure from him about, hey, are you going to wash those dishes? It was like, the
Right.
dishes are there. Who cares? But at the same time, if I wanted the house clean, and he's, but why? There's who was coming over to see if the house is clean or not, right? And so recognizing that, I was like, well, dishes are a really stupid reason for us to fight, especially because like we are going towards marriage, which we both said we were only doing this one time because of what our own blended families and how we weren't really trying to be that. It's too many people to invite. We had too many people to invite to our own wedding because of all the marriages that the parents did on either side. And so I remember I was like, hey, I noticed we've been fighting. And so I think I would like to propose us getting a cleaning service. And he was like, can we afford that? I was like, yes, it would only cost us this much. You just need to put this much more from each paycheck into the bank account, because we, at that point, had decided to do hybrid, joint, his and hers. And he was like, oh, yeah, that doesn't sound so bad. I was like, yeah, because we're going to split it. And so the cleaning lady came the first time. And he was like, this is awesome. I didn't think we would ever be able to have a cleaning lady. I was like, yeah. And I remember I told my mom, and my mom was like, who do you think you are? The Queen of Sheba? You can't clean your own house? And I was like, well, Mom, actually, I decided to do it because I think the cleaning service costs like maybe $150 a month if it's one of the longer months where she ends up coming 3 times instead of just 2 times. And that is way cheaper than marriage counseling. And she was like, you know what? Never thought of it that way. She hasn't bothered me since. And that was almost 20 years ago at this point.
What a great reframe. Yeah, my mom luckily had a cleaner for a while when we were in high school, and they were both working full time and life had gotten really busy. And I don't know what the behind the door closed conversations were leading up to that, but both of my parents had taken on domestic duties off and on throughout our childhood. But when I went to hire someone to help when I was working full time, David was working full time, and I had my business, he balked. And there were some limiting beliefs around it. And I was like, my hourly is 125. For me, it is a no-brainer if I can pay someone less than that, but it's also a no-brainer if they're better at something than I am, or it frees me up. You don't want to do, like, there are a lot of household chores that we'll share. We both hate doing laundry and we hate cleaning bathrooms. And I don't love doing dishes. He does most of the dishes now, but it took some finessing. It took so much stress off of our relationship for like $200 a month.
Yes. And what it is, you don't realize that you're both weighed down, right? Because even if one person is doing more, you're both probably doing something. And there's also the weighing of, am I doing enough? Are they doing enough? That comes into it, and wanting to try to get the balance right, but messing it up because we're humans and we're trying to figure it out, and we're both just trying to live our best lives together, but also separately because we're still individuals, right? And so I remember that was exactly it. My husband was like, "Do you think we could get a lawn service now?" He was convinced.
It just opens the whole,
He was like, "Oh, well, if we got the inside the house, cutting the grass has been kind of annoying. Do you think we could fit that in the budget?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. We can call around, get some quotes, see what it would cost us." And then that helped, because then now we could do what we wanted on our weekends instead of spending half the day in the yard, which was at that stage in our life really important and helpful. And we could go and do things and go to brunch and have a lazy morning instead of having to get up and cut grass and trim bushes, because we had a big yard at that time. And so it was a several hour endeavor.
Absolutely. No, I think that we were probably year 4, I think, when we started hiring out in our relationship. And it was like night and day. We didn't hire out yard things because David really enjoys doing, and even now we have acres and he enjoys doing all the yard things and the snow removal but the inside things, delightful. I love that opened the doors though. And he was like, "Oh man, we could hire out for this. Yeah, it's a game changer when you can have more time for yourself. If it's something that you love doing,
Right.
no. But if it's something that you don't love or it's not effective."
Yeah. One of the things that I recently spoke at a conference, and I talked about the 3 currencies of time, money, and energy.
Mhm.
And one of the activities I had them walk through is, I said, "Okay, this will probably piss you off, so take a deep breath before you do it. I want you to write down everything on your to-do list this week. Everything. House, kids, work, business, family, personal, self-care." And I gave them some time, and those lists were long. I said, "Okay, take your deep breath, because you're probably pissed about how much is on your list and on your plate." I said, "Now I want you to circle any of the things you actually love, or even just like doing. Something that when you do it, it makes you happy, or you like the result better when you do it. What are the things you actually get some pleasure from?" And so they circle that. I said, "Okay, now I want you to star anything that only you can do." Because, like, I'm the only person who can actually go to my doctor's appointment. Someone
Right.
can make it for me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can't send a surrogate to my doctor's appointment. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And so, they go and star. I say, "Okay, guess what? Anything that doesn't have a star or a circle is a list of stuff that you no longer have to do." Now, just because you do it better or because you think it goes smoother, but if you're feeling overwhelmed, because when y'all wrote the list, I saw the looks on your faces about, "Oh, this list is long," take some things off. If you needed the permission, I'm giving it to you today. And so if there's a listener who is like, "Oh, but I don't know if I can do that." If you can find the space, if you can, and if money isn't the thing you have, do a trade. I am a military spouse. And so many women, and not all women, but many of the spouses in my community do not work because it's
Mhm.
just too hard to have forward career progression depending on what your training and educational background is. And so many of the spouses opt out of the workforce for several years. But that doesn't mean they don't get tired of watching however many kids they have. And so one of the things I always recommend in my community, I say, "Hey, that other mom who also has 3 kids, she's probably feeling the exact same way you do. So what you do is y'all do a trade 2 hours a week. For 2 to 4 hours a week, you take all the kids. So you're in charge of 6 kids for 2 to 4 hours. But then on a different day, she's in charge of the 6 kids. So that way you all get a couple of hours to stare at the wall, to take a shower, the kind where you do all the things, where you shave
The
your
everything
legs
showers.
and
Yeah.
you do your deep conditioning, and you actually fully wash your body, right? So that because if you have 2 hours to do that and the kids are in someone else's care that you trust, because 6 kids is not that different than 3 kids once they're all together, and you only got to do it for a few hours.
Right.
And so trade that off. And like the women who've said, "You know what, that's a good idea," and they say, "It's made an amazing difference. Like, I actually washed my hair this week," or, "I really did stare at a wall for an hour and a half, and I had just enough more inside of me to keep going."
I think that's really powerful. I was thinking, again, not having children, writing that list out, and I was like, I'm really good at finding things that I don't want to do anymore. But even then, just in the mental list, it's like, there are a few things on there that might need to be rearranged a little, maybe reprioritize. I love that. What's your next tip for us?
Okay, so number 4
Mhm.
is figure out the right division of not only responsibilities, but money, right? Because I know for some families, it makes sense to put everything in the same pot. I know for some families, it makes no sense. And so they keep everything separate and they just divide. Okay, you're in charge of this set of bills or responsibilities, and you're in charge of this set of bills or responsibilities. And in some families, the hybrid approach is what works. And that's actually an approach we use. And there's a really specific reason why we did this. When we were first starting to combine everything, I was still managing some responsibilities for my mom and my siblings. And frankly, if I'm honest, I didn't want him to have a say in what I could and couldn't do for my family. And so I'd kind of propose like, hey, let's have a ours and then a his and hers. So one, you don't feel upset or have control over what I do for my mom because that was really important to me.
Mhm.
And I also didn't want it to be a source of conflict unnecessarily. But I also didn't want him to feel responsible for doing those things for my mom because that was a choice I made and came into the relationship with, right? And I also thought, it'd be easier too if you want to go spend $2,000 on audio equipment, real story. Then what am I going to do? I can't be like, why did you spend $2,000 on audio equipment? I'm like, oh, this equipment looks really nice, and just leave it
Mhm.
at that, right? Because it wasn't part of the joint money.
Exactly.
And that approach actually forced a level of communication that I think has been really good for us, where now once a quarter, we have a money meeting where we go over, okay, this is how much money we're putting into the joint accounts. This is how our bills line up. Is enough money going in? Do we have any upcoming expenses that we need to plan for? Travel, wedding, birthday parties, changes to the kids' schedules or sports setup? And then we make the adjustments as necessary. We take notes, we email it to ourselves, and then we do it all again 3-ish months later. And that has been super helpful because then we're talking about it. And now we're so good at it. It's not that we're starting with the money, we're starting with the lifestyle piece. Oh,
Mhm.
what's on our calendar? What's happening with the kids? Do we already buy plane tickets for that trip we've been talking about? And do we have enough hotel points? And do we need to transfer things? Right. So we're talking about the lifestyle stuff and then being like, okay, so what's the money consequence and making a plan about it. But it's awesome because it means all the time we're just talking about what's coming up for us and what we're excited about. And are the kids going to like it? And did we make the arrangements? And how do we make it easy for ourselves to travel and to have a good time? And it's awesome. And I hope everyone who's in a relationship gets to a place where those conversations are just part of your life and it feels good to have someone to work through that stuff with.
You get to future cast together, which I think is
Mhm.
really exciting. It's so funny that you say you guys do that once a quarter. When we were both working prior to moving out here, we would go over everything about once a quarter because my income was very variable for quite a while, despite being a higher income on average. And David's was very consistent. And so there were times where we had joint finances for a while. I didn't love that, neither did he, because we grew up with parents that had joint finances and our fathers had allowances, and we didn't love the infantilization that
Mhm.
sort of brought to the picture. But we both can be big spenders. I spend a lot on travel, he spends a lot on toys, motorcycles and dirt bikes and quads and remote control cars. And we would find ourselves getting so frustrated because I don't begrudge him that, but I don't want to see the bill come out of the account for it.
That's right.
And we separated out, and we now have completely and have maintained completely separate finances with joint decision making. And
Yes.
so mostly because had we continued the way that we were, we probably would have had one joint account and done the hybrid approach like the two of you were doing. But for us, with him, like his income source comes from our business now. And so that makes things very clean. Like he has his own couple of bills that he manages. Everything else is essentially joint at this point while like still being separate.
That's
But
right.
we'd have a discussion once a quarter. Hey, this is how my
Mhm.
income has changed this quarter based on what's going on next quarter, because we want it to be equitable, right? I don't want him, if he's making half of what I'm making, to have no fun money to spend. That's not fair
That's
to
right.
him. And I also don't want to be contributing 90% of my income to something and him going and effing off with the rest of his money when
That's
I
right.
have no play money. And they did really help the discussions to be having. And it was about once a quarter. We didn't have a set date. which we should have, but that's just kind of how it had come up. Like we do quarterly estimates for the business, and that's when I'd have the discussion because I'm like, hey, time to like chit chat. And it worked really well to be able to move responsibilities around that way for it to feel fair. And then we'd have a check-in normally after about a month or so of
Mm-hmm.
any big changes. Hey,
Like,
is this
is
feeling
this still right?
good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then
That's
assuming
right.
that it was a yes or no, otherwise we, we'd update what we were doing, and it worked
That's
really
right.
well.
And when you're first starting out, it probably needs to be a little more frequent, like maybe not weekly, but maybe once a month, because you're just one, you're learning each other's patterns and styles and preferences. And so doing it a little more frequently in the beginning helps you kind of get there a little faster. And then once
Mhm.
you all are in a fairly well-knowing situation, then about quarterly is about how frequently your life will change, right? Just because
Right.
school semesters, quarterly business goals, whether you're working for a company or on your own, seasons for sports if you're also parenting, seasons for the other adults in your life, your parents or siblings, like what things are happening on. So quarterly is about right, like businesses running quarters on purpose.
Right. Yeah, no, that's been the interesting update for us in the last year or so is it's moved from discussions about like our own individual finances to we have aging parents and grandparents and our responsibilities are changing, and that causes both our personal schedules. Like the most recent reassessment we had to do is we need someone at our house more to help because the two of us are gone really frequently right now with family responsibilities, work responsibilities, travel responsibilities. And that was a discussion that had to be held between the two of us was we need help at home. There's
That's
not
right.
like our time requirements, our energy requirements
Mhm.
are changing. And so our money requirements are changing a little bit too.
Right. And in your relationship, like almost nothing will be forever except maybe your love for one another, right? And so if what we need right now is this, do it. Get it done. Get the help you need, get the resources in, shift to make it easier, right? And then as soon as things lighten up or change or you need something different, change it.
Mhm.
Like the cool thing about having a life partner is that you should literally be married to 27 different people by the time it's all said and done, right? Because if I was the same person that met my husband at 19, now nearly 20 years later, we would have some bigger issues, right? like
Right.
like we're supposed to evolve and grow and change and shift. And the beautiful part about having a life partner through that is they can both remind you of things that have been important to you along the way. Hey, there's this common theme in your life. So even though you shifted careers or even though you shifted how you like to spend your time and your energy, remember these things have always been important to you. Where is that in your current plan? But they also can say, well, remember we changed this 10 years ago and it worked out fine. So they can also be the reminder that like us changing something, us shifting something, it always works out for us.
Right.
So
Right.
go for it.
Yeah. No, I feel like we've lived 1,000 lives in the last 12 years. And it's so interesting to me to reflect back on that at times. And I didn't go into it expecting my husband to be anyone other than who he was. But the evolution that the two of us have had is just, it's so interesting. So beautifully said.
I think we're at 4. So then number 5 is, bring in help. And when it comes to the money piece, sometimes if the conversations are really tougher than you think they should be or could be, then this is a great time to bring somebody in. And that could be a wide range of professionals. That could be somebody like me who's a pseudo professional, right? I don't have licenses, and that's on purpose because when you have a license, when you have certifications, there are certain things you can't talk about. And sometimes I need to get down with people and be like, stop. No. And as a licensed person, I might not be able
Right.
to say it the same way. And so I have made that choice, even though I've had the option to like not go. So maybe you need a coach, someone who can like really get down, who knows the stuff, but can be flexible at how they help you get there.
Mhm.
Maybe you do need a certified financial planner or similar person who can really talk about the numbers and how the different choices and investments or not that you're making will look now, midterm, long term. Maybe you need a therapist because maybe money is where it's showing up, but that you need some help with the framework and how you talk about hard things, right? And that's okay. Maybe you need a will attorney and an estate attorney because maybe what is causing the issue is like maybe like you said, you're in this life stage where your individual as a couple finances are pretty solid, but you have these other things coming in from the parents who are growing older and who have different needs and then are tapping into you differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tapping into your energy and your time and your money differently. And so sometimes sitting down under the framework of an estate plan, because you got to talk about so many things, can actually be really enlightening, because in what other setting would you know that your spouse really wants to create a scholarship in the honor of their aunt, right? Like, when would that have
Mm-hmm.
come up? Only in the situation where it's okay, you've died, and what do you want in your money that's left over to go once we've taken care of all of the needs to be taken care of
Mm-hmm.
things? And you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was important to you. We can actually work that into our plan before you die if you like.
Right. Right. It can let you see one another in a different light and more fully.
Mm-hmm. So call in the help if it's feeling tougher, and then make sure whoever is the most reluctant part of the pair, let them pick the person, because they just need to be in the conversation in a way that feels good,
Mm-hmm.
and the other person just needs the conversation to happen. So let the more reluctant person get comfortable with who the professional is that's helping, because it'll go smoother that way.
I love that. Yeah, we've become very familiar with trust recently. It has been a deep dive into all of that over the last couple of years. And the biggest thing I think that I would add to that is making sure that you feel like you can talk to who you're working with. I know that I see it happen in my profession. I'm sure you see it happen with some of the clients that you work with, but a lot of with people that come to us and, oh my gosh, I feel like I can actually share things with you. That kind of should be the goal when you're working, frankly, with anything in your life, but especially when it comes to like money, legal matters, etc. Like, you should be able to share because it impacts the bigger picture of every facet of your life.
That's right. Like, when it comes down to it, you as an individual are the CEO and CFO of your life. So hire and fire accordingly. If the team of professionals who are on your team aren't giving you what you need, or making you feel weird, or you feel like you can't be open with them, find somebody else. There are lots of other professionals who might be your style, who might be your speed, who just might just put you at ease so that you can lay it all out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think it's so a lot of times I think people will think that they don't have the right to that necessarily, or they just found who they found. And it's heartbreaking because I know that's what I look for in any professional that I work with. I want to be able to actually like engage, vibe
Mm-hmm.
check for, lack of a deeper term. Like, we should be able to just, I'm not gonna say we'll be best friends, but
Right.
is
Like,
there a level of communal understanding?
I want to feel like you're my friend, even if I only talk to you about my money once a quarter. I
Yes.
still want to be like
Yes.
looking forward to, ooh, I'm talking to
Yes.
Katelyn. I'm so excited. I've had many things to tell her. She's not going to
Yeah.
be mad at me about this thing, but maybe about this thing, but we're going to work it out. Like, you want to have that
Yeah.
sing-songy walk as you're on your way
Yes.
to your appointment, not that, oh, I got to go see my
Oh,
so-and-so.
yeah. 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 You're not dreading it. You're not dragging your feet. You're excited as much as you can be, right? For some of the more potentially mundane things in life for some people. So I love that. I would love to hear more about your book as well.
Okay. So I wrote a book called How to Afford Everything. Here it is.
Cute.
This is my emotional support copy. You see, it's all tattered and it's got my tags and my highlights, because this is the one I carry with me literally everywhere I go. But anytime I do, a speaking gig or a coaching session, because I'm like, here, right here on page 125. But I wrote the book actually in 127 days, because I had been thinking about it for so long, for over a decade. I had all these outlines that I had started. I had a different angle that I was going to take in an earlier version of the book and never really got far with it, and hired an editor after I interviewed, I think, 8 or 9, because I was really concerned about it needed to sound like me. It needed to be in my voice. It had to be me in paper form.
Right.
And so going through all those editors, I finally found the one who was like, okay, she gets it. She repeated back to me something that I said way earlier in the conversation. It felt like she got it. So like, we're hiring her. And from the time I paid the editor to the time I was holding this little baby in my hand was 127 days, because I had all these worksheets and presentations and things that I had been doing over the years. And we just put it into book form, and it was awesome. It was like, I'd expected to be publishing in April of this year, but it came out in December, because we were
Holy
rolling.
cow.
Yeah, we
Wow.
were rolling.
That's impressive.
And I
But
wrote
when you
it.
know the material, like,
Yeah, and I wrote it for people who are starting out or starting over, who
okay.
maybe have some of the basics down, but know or want or wish that their financial lives could be smoother, could be easier, they could just afford to say yes, that they could just afford to do the things they needed to do. Because I believe that all working people deserve that, right? Deserve to have some level of peace and comfort when it comes to money. Because I know the difference. I've had a little bit of money, I've had negative money, and now that I have a little, like, money is fun. And I want people to know that. I want people to feel that. I want people that if I ask them, okay, if money was a person, how would you describe them? They're like, oh, money's my buddy. Money takes me on fun adventures. Money helps me solve problems. Money helps me do the things that make my life run smoothly so that I can do the things that bring me joy and happiness. Yeah.
Yes.
I think working people deserve that. Working people deserve to feel that way. At
Oh,
least for one point in
absolutely.
their lives, you know?
I think for so long, having been so broke in my early 20s when I was in college and working 4 jobs and didn't have sick time and work, it felt like you just could never, it was a really interesting relationship with money. And then to get to the point where it was like, okay, this can actually open up opportunities. This can give me choices. This can give me freedom. This, like, freedom to choose what my life looked like. And I'm not, it's not Jeff Bezos up in this house, but like for so many reasons, but there's a very interesting change that happens when you get to the point where money isn't some avoidant attachment, or you have it and then it's gone and it's a secure attachment and you just this is great, this is comfortable. Like, we love money, we love talking about money, we love saving money, we love spending money, we love earning money, like
we love teaching people
it.
About money, like all of that.
Yeah, it's such a different relationship. And I agree. I would love for everyone in their life to be able to feel that way and feel the possibilities that come
because
with
there
it
is
as well.
magic. There's magic there. In fact, so bonus. So we already talked about the 5 things couples can do, right? So the bonus tip, and this is for individuals or people in couples, is I talk about a magic number. So budgeting gets a bad rap, right? Like, people don't like budgeting. It's hard. It never works for me. It's like a diet, right? But part of it is because people don't actually know their magic number. And this is the number of what it actually costs you to live your life the best day, the best week, the best month ever. And so if you don't take anything else from this conversation today, I want you to sit down and write down what it actually costs you to live your best life ever, where the bills are paid, you can go out to brunch or lunch or dinner, whatever your fancy is. An emergency comes up and you turn into an inconvenience instead of it being an emergency. What is that number for you on a month-to-month basis or on an annual basis? And write it down. And just having that knowledge is powerful. So calculate your magic number. And if you're in a partnership, each of you should calculate it to see if there's a difference.
Yes. Because I think, I know in our partnership, it would be very different. But I also think that there may be a lack of awareness sometimes around, especially when you have a business. I think that has to be factored in as well, right? Because you would sort of have a business magic number that like factors into your personal.
That's right.
I love that though. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to write out the list that you laid out earlier with the stars and the circles.
We'll put it on my website, darlabishop.com/resources as a freebie. And this is the time, energy, money, currency tracker.
Okay. And we'll link to it in the notes. Yeah, I think that would be awesome and super valuable for everyone. Speaking of, where all can everyone find you? Where do you live most often?
Yes. And so I am most active on LinkedIn and Instagram because I know how to work those.
Fair.
I have helpers who help me in other places, but I'm really the one posting on those 2 properties because I know how to work those from my phone.
Amazing. Okay, perfect.
And my website is darlabishop.com. I have tons of freebies on the resource center. You can actually read a sample chapter, and it's not
awesome.
It's not just like the intro chapter. I actually on purpose put the summary chapter so that way you could be like, okay, what is this girl talking about? So the summary chapter is there. Look at you adulting, one of my favorites. There's also a list of other podcasts I visited. This will be there so that if you just want to try me out to hear, and I tell all my best stories and lessons on podcasts anyway. So listen in.
Absolutely. Okay, that's amazing. Darla, thank you so much. This was an absolute delight. And I love getting to chat money, magic, relationships, everything all together, right? Because it's just so intertwined. And I think being able to bring that little bit of sparkle into it can be where so many of us are really lacking in the financial space. You have logistics, you understand like the meat and potatoes, but like, where are the sprinkles?
That's right.
So thank you for bringing the sprinkles and the meat and potatoes today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Wealth Witches podcast. I hope our magical money talks have left you feeling empowered and inspired. Remember, wealth isn't just about dollars in the bank, it's about abundance and financial freedom in all aspects of your life. I'm Katelyn Magnuson, encouraging you to keep challenging the status quo and embrace your inner witch on this financial journey. Until next time, stay magical.